are you, Bruce? Yeah. And look here, I've been taking bows for your handiwork all morning.
Much later.
Gandalf, my old friend, this will be a night to remember.
Oh my God!
I've been at war with myself over this entry because I couldn't decide if this movie or the James Cameron movie should take the number 2 spot. I went back and forth several times. On the one hand, A Night to Remember came out first and influenced a lot of the scenes and camera shots that you will come to see in the James Cameron film. On the other hand, I have more nostalgia and affection towards the 1997 movie. And it was the film that got me into my fascination with the RMS Titanic. And I don't do draws on this list, mostly because of convenience. And it would be a little tricky to compare 2 movies at the same time and not talk about them by themselves for their own merits. So let's just say that A Night to Remember and the James Cameron movie are drawn as equals, but Night to Remember is number 3 purely by default. For those who love this movie and dislike the James Cameron movie, that's fine. The things I say in these videos are mostly subjective anyway. A Night to Remember definitely achieves the humanity surrounding the Titanic more than any other entry I've covered. In the first 20 minutes of the film, the public and private moments within the ship, ranging from the first class dining room to the bowels of the ship, feels as though you are part of these moments. All you have to do is reach out and take that pencil from under Ismay's nose before it gets knocked over. These opening scenes encourage the audience to view the film as a human experience. These characters and everyone surrounding them are regular people with hopes and secrets and flaws of their own. And when the iceberg hits, you know what's coming, but these characters, save for Andrews and the captain, do not. More than half the people on that ship are going to die, many of whom are those you have met in those preceding scenes. There is no fixed narrative to this film besides the ship sinking. Unlike other films about the Titanic, there is not a fictional story happening in the background. Every character here was either a real person on the Titanic or based on a real person. The closest thing Night to Remember has to a main character is Charles Lightoller, the second officer, played by Kenneth More, and I have accidentally been confusing him with Kenneth Williams every now and then. But he also looks like Kenneth Branagh, so yeah, this has been an odd experience. Aside from Lightoller, there is also representation of other parts of the ship represented in other characters. Andrews, Ismay and the Duff Gordons show the first class experience, followed by the newlywed Clarks in second class, and a handful of immigrants in steerage. The crew is split into 4 key locations: the bridge, the engine room, the boiler room and the wireless room. Although the Duff Gordons have been renamed as the Richards, they still carry out the same plot beats as their real life counterparts, so I'm still going to refer to them as the Duff Gordons. I could list all the people who are portrayed here, but that would eat up my word count, so instead let's talk about the imagery and technicals of the film itself. The uniqueness of the film allows a somewhat unbiased view of how events played out, starting as a quaint and unremarkable voyage across the Atlantic before descending into chaos, first slowly and then faster and faster, much like the Titanic itself. I say somewhat because Lightoller's actions on the night of the sinking have been slightly sanitised. His insistence to launch boats under capacity and not letting a single man on board has been universally criticised. He is definitely shown as an antagonistic character in the James Cameron movie, and was called out for his behaviour.
They were tested in Belfast with the weight of 70 men. Now, fill these boats, Mr. Lightoller, for God's sake, man!
In Night to Remember, Lightoller is shown to not be allowing men on board, but the staging of it makes the men he's turning away seem cowardly for trying to save their lives. He humbles himself to let a 13-year-old on board, and Puchin is portrayed as competent enough to be allowed on Lifeboat 6 when there aren't enough hands available. However, there is no explicit criticism of Lightoller's actions. He even steals a scene off of Officer Lowe by being the one to tell Ismay off when he starts to panic. Towards the end, Lightoller laments not having saved more, but no one seems to mention that he might have saved a few more if he had let men on board. You're entitled to your own opinions about Lightoller, though I personally believe he went the rest of his life regretting his actions, and perhaps his going to Dunkirk to save the British soldiers redeemed him somewhat. Kenneth More still delivered a great performance, and he tried to set a good example to the extras on the set when they were filming some of the nighttime water scenes, where he jumped into the pool where they were filming first, only to experience how horribly cold it was, much like Lightoller himself when he fell into the water, and he tried to stop the other extras from following, but they were already jumping in after him. Oh, who's this? Hi, Louis. Best for you not to be here, because Alan's in here and he won't like it, okay? Oh, you're so pretty and soft and cuddly. Yeah, purr for me, purr for me, purr for me, meow meow meow. The main theme appears to be humanity's helplessness against the chaotic forces of the universe. But we still fight for survival anyway, just like my cat who is now trying to wriggle out of my arms. And this is why I think the film works best as a black and white movie, rather than colour. The film was initially filmed in black and white, but a coloured-in cut is available. In the original, you can't see anything surrounding the ship, as it takes full advantage of the nighttime setting. The ship has over 2,000 people on it, and they are all surrounded by the void, adding to the atmosphere of dread. In colour, I don't know, I feel it removes the ominous motif. Plus, even though the cut is coloured in, it has the same problems as Atlantic, where the colours are all muted or oversaturated, sometimes showing the characters coloured in, but not the background. In the post-sinking scenes with the collapsibles, it sort of blends in and out of colour and monochrome. So overall, it is just easier to watch in black and white. Sometimes it can be easier to watch a movie with such a large cast in colour because it's easier to tell them apart based on what they are wearing, what their hair colour is, and all that stuff. But in A Night to Remember, each character that carries a significant plot point tends to have a recognisable appearance anyway. Before CGI, sometimes it was easier to film huge set pieces at night to hide anything that might kill the illusion. The effects in A Night to Remember is probably the best outside the Cameron film. While they didn't rebuild the ship in order to demonstrate her sheer size, they filled in the gaps by showing stock footage of other ocean liners, notably the Lusitania and the Olympic, while also using scale models to show the ship in full, and close-ups of large set pieces, and using jump cuts showing people jumping off the ship in the final plunge. Even with the use of practical effects, this was the closest we came to getting a sense of Titanic scale before 1997. The interior sets, and those out on deck, are also historically accurate. They're so close to the Cameron film that when I first watched it, I was cross-referencing in my head as to where Jack and Rose would have been at certain points. The dedication of the filmmakers to honour the memories and victims of survivors of the Titanic was so persistent that they gathered several survivors as well as family members of some of the victims. This included the daughter of Captain Smith, Helen, who was moved to tears when she saw Lawrence Naismith in costume, because he looked exactly like her father. And sadly, there are a few shots from the Nazi-made Titanic film in here. Though they are simply contextless shots showing the progression of the ship's flooding, there are moments where I could spot the Hays Code having a modicum of influence over certain depictions. The most significant is the more genial depiction of J. Bruce Ismay. I never realised that he was never actually addressed by name in the film, only as Mr. Chairman. Ismay is presented as a friendly and approachable fellow at the beginning of the movie, and actually helps with the evacuations. In the scene where he gets on the lifeboat, he is shown desperately trying to be brave, but his will to survive ultimately wins out, and his regret is a key point of focus for the rest of the film. However, because Ismay has been shown as likeable and helpful throughout, he is not written as cowardly, just a guy wanting to stay alive. Another moment I noticed was that of the wireless room scene, where Bride and Phillips have an altercation with another crew member trying to steal their lifebelts. In real life, Bride was the one who struck the intruder, either killing him or just knocking him unconscious, but seeing as Bride survives, he couldn't be seen potentially killing someone and surviving, so Phillips is the one who delivers the blow. The SS Californian is featured more prominently than in any other Titanic medium. It is almost comedic as the chaos mounts on the Titanic, while the officers on the Californian and the captain slowly observe the strange behaviour that none of them decide to act on. The contrast will probably cause the viewer to scream in rage. It would have been satisfying to have had a scene where they eventually found out about the sinking and realised the ship was in distress the whole time. The closure of the Californian subplot was in the final lines of the film, being told to Captain Rostron. Because the perspective of the film is telling it from the experience of people on the ship, there is no huge dramatic build-up to the iceberg, which is usually expected. Instead, the ship slowly crawls to that inevitability, with only ice warnings and the Californian's decision to stop for the night as foreshadowing. It is intended to be as much a surprise to the viewers as it was to people on board. When it hits, there is no huge crash and a swift avalanche of chaos with people reacting to the shudders. The stokers calmly drop what they're doing and retreat into the next boiler room. Officers like Lightoller get up and gather on deck, and some of the stewards argue about what it could be but don't seem alarmed. It's not for a good while before the danger of the situation is realised. This also leads me to praise this version of Andrews. I am truly at a loss as to who was the best version of Andrews because he's never had a bad portrayal, even in the musical. So, sod it, I'm saying this one's the best. Because, well, yes, he was more prominent in the James Cameron film. That film would not have existed if A Night to Remember hadn't come out first. It was this film that influenced Cameron to make it in the first place, so this is my favourite Andrews, because I believe he guided, by proxy, Victor Garber. If you want to understand the full tragedy of the Titanic, you need to watch A Night to Remember, because it opens a window into a story that is usually boiled down into statistics, timestamps and lists of objects. It was a human catastrophe in which humans suffered, and sometimes we forget that.